TNCRadio.LIVE, your commercial driver navigation station.
Good afternoon. This is TNCRadio.LIVE, and this is the Truckers Network Radio Show with your host, Shelley Johnson.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Yes, this is the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNCRadio.LIVE. We're all about trucking, the news, information, comedy, and music truckers want to hear. And whether you know it or not, health, safety, and happiness really go hand in hand. Truckers' safety and happiness are so very important to keep our essential workers rolling. We have a very special guest today, Sylvia Marusyk. Let me try that again. Sylvia Marusyk is an international speaker and occupational therapist and founder of Mind Body Works Canada, who talks about creating happy, healthy people in the workplace. She's an expert on health, well-being, and happiness. She's the former host of Happy Hour with Sylvia, and she's an activational mentor who's changing the way we look at occupational health and safety. Welcome, Sylvia. So very sorry I stumbled on your last name, and I even had it written out for me. But
I thought you did a great job, Shelley, and thank you so much for having me. You know, these are the small things in life, right? What's in a name?
I'd love to learn more about you and the insights you have. I'm sure our listeners do too. Who are you? What do you do? And what can we learn from you?
Well, in a nutshell, my training is as an occupational therapist, but because of a variety of circumstances in my life, I've become a crusader, if you will, about health and well-being. I have come to realize through my research, through my travels across North America and beyond, that we have developed exceptional competence at developing disease. We are truly magnificent creatures in that we can create what we imagine. So we have created disease and symptoms and suffering that is actually completely unnecessary for the most part. And we know that in North America in particular, stress is our number one health epidemic when you are not during, when you're not talking about a year in which there is an actual viral pandemic. So stress was our greatest health epidemic until this year, and it is mostly within our control. So my passion has become prevention. My passion has become trying to understand the mechanism by which we create disease is the same mechanism by which we can create health if we only understood the mind shift. And once you understand that, you have unlimited potential to create health instead of disease.
That's a great perspective, and I don't think a lot of people think about that. And certainly stress. Oh my goodness, 2020. You've got a pandemic, you've got stress. What are you seeing right now in terms of the reactions? You had said we aren't really even at the top of the bell curve in terms of stress.
No. You know, here's what happens to us. When we are stressed, we go into something called the fight or flight response. This is grade 10 biology. And if you would just come with me on a little meditation for a moment and imagine, I want you to see a deer in the meadow. Now, the deer does not smell a predator because predators are smart enough to be upwind, but the deer senses the energy of a predator, just like you and I sense each other's energy. Now, for some of you who are thinking that's a little woo-woo, I want you to remember a time when you walked into a business or a room in your home and you didn't hear what was going on, but you feel like you need to back the hell out. So that is the sensing of energy. We sense whether people are safe, kind, good, mean, whatever. A deer senses the energy of the predator, and with the sensing, begins to run. That's the fight or flight response kicking in to keep the deer alive. A healthy deer might be able to outrun that predator and save its life. And within minutes of outrunning the predator, it will go back into what we call homeostasis, or peacefulness, calmness, and it will flip out of that fight or flight response into what we call rest and restore. When we are in the middle of a pandemic or chronic stress, we are like the deer that is just never shaking the predator. It's like, has COVID stopped yet? You know, just when we thought that things could maybe get back to some semblance of normalcy or normalcy, we're in lockdown again.
Yep.
So what's happening this year is that the stress has become chronic, and we will become exhausted and drop. Now, if we drop before the predator gets us, we just are in sheer exhaustion, and then we will at least have survived. If we don't drop before the predator drops, or before the predator gets exhausted and the predator gets us, we become sick. And that doesn't necessarily mean with COVID, but it means that your immune system has now been harmed by the exhaustion that you've just experienced in trying to outrun this stress. And now you succumb to an illness or an injury. And so that's the piece that I am so desperately, passionately trying to prevent. And what we will see is in the next 6 to 12 months, as people become exhausted from the extra stress, remember we all had stress before COVID,
Sure.
the extra stress, we will see unprecedented numbers of depression, anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, physical illness, emotional upset, like it's suicide. It's going to be terrible if we don't do something ahead of time.
So what can people do to keep from falling off that cliff? I mean, it's just scary when you think about it.
It is really scary. And it would be so nice if I could say to you, well, you know, there's this pink pill, and if you take this, it protects you. But it's not that simple. In fact, you know, so often the reason that we fail at making the changes we need to make in our health is because it takes work and it's effort. And who's got effort on your to-do list for today?
Sure.
Anybody?
Right. Yeah.
Right. So what it means, Shelley, is that we need to start with something as simple as when you wake up in the morning, what's your attitude? Do you wake up in the morning and say, well, I wonder how this day is going to go? Or do you wake up in the morning and say, this is how this day is going to go?
More of a positive affirmation then, sort of.
A positive affirmation and an intention. And I was speaking to somebody about this very topic today, and she said, well, that doesn't really work all the time because you can plan your whole day out and then, you know, things go sideways. And I said, I think you've misunderstood me. I'm not saying you should wake up in the morning and say, this is what I'm going to do from 8 to 9. Then I'm going to do this. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the intention behind how we show up for this day. In other words, nothing is going to stop me from maintaining my peace today. Nothing is going to stop me from finding joy in this day. Nothing is going to stop me from showing up for the people around me. That grumpy person is not going to make me grumpy. That being cut off in traffic is not going to set me on a big rampage for the next 2 hours. That's not how I'm showing up today. I am showing up for me because, and I'll explain the biology of what happens to us and the physiology of what happens to us in the stress response, because this is to protect your well-being, not just the well-being of the people around us. Never mind about them right now. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about creating a happier, healthier life for you. Not just about extending life expectancy, but more importantly, it's about quality of life until we die.
Taking control. Would you say that kind of sums it up? And because other people are into their own little world, they're myopic, doing whatever they're doing, and you choose how to react, right?
Absolutely. And I'm not saying that that's an easy choice to make. What you have to consider is who is harmed by your anger or your frustration or your grumpiness. Is it the people around you? Sometimes it can be because of the way we express those things. But the person who is the most harmed when you are angry that someone cut you off in traffic or your dispatcher was rude to you, the person who is most harmed is you, because you're the person with the physiological cascade of really harmful, toxic biochemical compounds that your body produces. That's happening in your body. It's not happening in your dispatchers or your wife's or your husband's or the guy who cut you off or woman who cut you off this morning. It's your well-being. It's the toxins in your body harming you with those thoughts. And you might be thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, this sounds very dramatic, right? How can a thought possibly be toxic? Well, the research proves that it is, in fact, the case. So when we look at the main marker for inflammation, it's called C-reactive protein. When we look at studies where the researchers have put people into an experimental situation where they can have a positive statement or outcome, a positive feeling. So, for example, in one study, people watched a really positive, happy movie. And then they were asked to make a statement about the movie, and their C-reactive protein levels were measured before and after. Another group watched something really awful, and they were asked to make a statement about that. Those levels were measured. And in the group that had these negative thoughts about what they had seen, their C-reactive protein was statistically significantly higher, meaning their bodies were in an inflammatory situation.
Sure.
That means tissues and cells are actually being harmed by a negative thought.
I would love to have you elaborate more about that. We're going to be actually listening to some music. Sylvia, you've got some fabulous insight here. This is the Truckers Network radio show. We're interviewing Sylvia Marusyk, and she's the founder of Mind Body Works Canada. Fabulous insights that we can all learn from. This is the Truckers Network radio show. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly. We're talking with Sylvia Marusyk, an international speaker, occupational therapist, and founder of Mind Body Works Canada. She's talking about some absolutely phenomenal things that I think are a great perspective for everyone. Before we went to the song, Sylvia, you had some fantastic insight on what stress does to us. Could you elaborate more on how thoughts are toxic and what it actually does to our bodies and who we are, and maybe how we could break out of that pattern?
You bet. Wow, what a fantastic question. I'm so glad you asked, because I am dying to tell you guys this. So let's talk basic biology and physiology for a moment. Let's talk about what happens when you're stressed out, you're upset, you're frustrated, and there's a continuum. This continuum, this fight or flight response, we call this the sympathetic nervous system. This happens every time we are in an emotional state that is negative. So it's designed to keep us alive. So think about fear, think about anger, think about frustration. These emotions are designed to help us look for threats in the environment to keep us alive. So think about sympathetic or stress response as being the survival response. So there's a lot of S's there. They all go together. The opposite of that is the parasympathetic nervous system. That's when the deer that was running for its life has outrun the predator. And remember, I made a stipulation about a healthy deer. The healthier that deer is, the longer it can go outrunning that predator. And it can just keep going and will not collapse in exhaustion as rapidly as an unwell deer. Do you get the analogy here, everyone?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right? So the healthier you are, the healthier your immune system is, the healthier you are physically, mentally, emotionally, the better you are able to withstand any sort of threat. Doesn't matter what the threat is, whether it's a pandemic on top of all the stress you had before and so on. So here we are in the stress response. A number of things happen. Blood gets diverted from digestion to big muscles, our blood pressure goes up, heart rate goes up. And you know this to be true because you've experienced this when you're anxious or fearful or angry. These are the things that happen to you. And your body wants to run or fight. Now, the other really important thing that happens to us is because we don't need certain parts of our brain function when we're trying to survive, we just need our primitive brain. Blood flow moves from our frontal lobe, which is literally in front, under your forehead, moves to the back of the brain or the primitive brain. But in that stress response, because of the shift in blood flow, we become unable to problem solve, troubleshoot, plan, organize, connect, ask for help, and cooperate. So I want you to think about that for a moment. You know, your spouse comes home completely stressed out. Let's say your spouse is a woman and you're a guy. Your spouse comes home completely stressed out from her workday and starts to dump all this stuff on you, and you say, well-meaning, you know what you should have done? You should have done this. And I don't know what happens in your house, but that's grounds for World War III right there.
I learned a long time ago not to should on myself.
Right? I love that. Oh my gosh, that's so brilliant. So what's happening there is your spouse's frontal lobe doesn't compute the logic of what you've just said. I can't even manage the logic of what you've just said because that part of my brain isn't getting blood flow right now. Think about this at work. Think about what's just happened to you. You've had a near miss on the highway. And are you actually going to just get back in your truck and keep driving? Please don't do that. Your body, your brain is in fight or flight, which means the possibility of you making a serious error in judgment right now is very high because your frontal lobe is not getting blood flow until you are out of fight or flight. Now, Shelley, you asked a question about toxic thoughts.
Yes.
Just think about this for a minute. If you were in a seminar with me, I would take you through a meditation that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that you can change your body, your physiology with a thought. Now, those negative thoughts put us into fight or flight. Think about a fear-based response. Think about a fearful thought. How freaked out can you get at just thinking about something that scares you?
You really can. It's an amazing
You really
thing.
can. Right. That's a physiological response that is now harmful because we are now we're in fight or flight, and we are producing hormones that over long periods of time in large amounts are toxic to us, like cortisol. Mm-hmm. Cortisol is a catabolic hormone. It starts to break down tissue. Now, when we are in fight or flight, not only is our frontal lobe offline, not only are we producing this very dangerous stress hormone, cortisol, over long periods of time, but we are also now behaving badly in our workplaces and in our homes. We're isolating. We don't want to cooperate. We're literally trying to fight or flight from everyone and with everyone. Now, the way out of this is to shut down that response and get into what we call the parasympathetic or rest and restore response. That's where the frontal lobe comes back online. We can problem solve. We can think clearly. We actually want to work with our colleagues and be cooperative and seek connection with other people. We will take people's advice and help. And we are producing hormones that are really good for us, like serotonin, the good mood fluid, oxytocin, the cuddling hormone, endorphins, the best legal high that you can ever have, and dopamine, the reward hormone that makes us feel like we want to do that thing again and again because it just feels so good.
How do you get people into that perspective, though? I think that there's so much desperation out there. Yeah. People don't really know where to turn, and they're kind of going around in a circle when you think about it.
Absolutely true. And what I would say to you is there's a couple of questions you can ask yourself. Number one, are you feeling fantastic most days? Because if you're not, that should be motivation enough to do something different. Number two, is what you're doing right now working for you? And by working for you, I mean, do you have great relationships with pretty much everyone in your life most of the time? Do you have energy to get done what you need to get done? Do you have no trouble sleeping? You're at a healthy weight. You have good muscle tone. Your skin is vibrant and healthy looking. Do you get where I'm going, guys? If everything's going well in your life, maybe you don't need to deal with your stress. But if you are not living your best life, I'm going to ask you to consider that handling stress differently might just be your ticket to a better life.
How does a driver do that when they're in their cab by themselves? How do they maintain that focus and motivation to achieve what you're talking about?
Well, I think the important thing for people to do, especially when you have time alone, is to spend a little time getting to know yourself and finding out what's going on. And I want to give you an example from my own life. So in January of this year, just before the pandemic hit, I was completely blindsided with a diagnosis of cancer.
Oh, wow.
I am one of the healthiest people I've ever met. My children say all the time, my mom's the healthiest person you'll ever meet. You know, my adult children, all of my friends would say the same thing. And although I'm genetically loaded to die young of cancer in my family from both sides, I always said, but it's not going to be me because I'm the one who's done all the work. I did all the work. My parents died young. I've got 3 siblings that have already died of cancer in their 50s. I'm in my 50s, and I said, but it'll never be me. And it isn't me. I was diagnosed, but I'm not dead. I'm not going to die. But, you know, when you look at an unexpected diagnosis, it has a way of, you know, necessity is the mother of invention, right? It has a way of shaking you out of where you're at and either catapulting you forward in life or you get stuck backward in bitter instead of moving forward in better. So because of COVID, I had a lot of time after my surgery in February to really spend time with myself and ask myself, what is missing from my life? What needs to shift and what needs to change? And, you know, this sounds so cliche, but if you don't take this time, truckers, you're alone a lot, but I bet a lot of times you're listening to music or talking to people. Take some time to get to know you because what you discover will blow you away. We can talk more about that.
What wonderful insights, Sylvia. And if anyone knows how to change perspective and head in the right direction, you certainly do. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. We'll be back in a few minutes with Sylvia and her wonderful insights. Stay tuned. This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly. We're talking to Sylvia Marusyk, an international speaker, occupational therapist, and founder of Mind Body Works Canada. She's got some marvelous perspectives on coping, lowering stress, and feeling better. Certainly, we've been talking about toxic thinking, Sylvia. I have run into people who actually feed on being negative. And when you offer them a solution, they don't seem to like it. They'd rather just have their problems because that's what they focus on. How do people get out of that? And why did they get into that where they almost get a reward from being negative?
Oh, man, you just hit the nail on the head, Shelley. The stress response is addictive. We actually get addicted to the hormones, the cortisol, the adrenaline. We get addicted to that. And some of you know people like this who just literally seem to experience nothing but drama in their life. It's like when there is no drama, they create drama because it becomes an addiction. But it is as dangerous as becoming addicted to alcohol, and it's pretty much the same reason. It's the biochemical change that happens that creates the addiction. It's no different than becoming addicted to food, especially sugar, or becoming addicted to drugs or shopping. It really all comes down to the same thing. And in addition to that, now we add into the mix that negative person has a victim stance in their life, that they are the victim of everything and everyone. And that's sometimes because it gets them sympathy sometimes, or has in their life, becomes literally their makeup. It's how they show up in the world, that everything bad happens to them and they should be pitied. And it's a way out of doing the hard work that you and I want to do, which is where we say, I'm no victim. I'm going to take control of my life. I am not going to wake up in the morning and say, well, I wonder how this day is going to go. That's a victim mentality versus this is the way I'm showing up today. And no one's changing this. I choose to be happy and peaceful today because it's good for my health. So, those people, run from them. Their negative energy will actually harm your well-being if you allow them to get their hooks in you. And I say that with respect for both parties.
Is there any way that they can break out of that sort of mentality, or are they so hooked into the reinforcement, I guess, they get from these negative hormones and the stress and everything that they don't want to change?
Yes, people can absolutely change, but there is a Buddhist saying that applies very much to what I do and very much to how we see people like this that we would love to change. And that is the teacher arrives when the student is ready. In other words, they will learn when circumstances in their life force them into a situation where they are open to learning. So this is what we were talking about before, guys, when I was saying, is what you're doing working for you? So if you are that person that is addicted to stress, ask yourself, is it working for you? Are you happy? Can you honestly say what I just said to Shelley off air, which is I am in the best health of my adult life, emotionally, spiritually, physically. I've just been diagnosed with breast cancer. I've had surgery and radiation, and I'm taking a medicine that I have to take for the next 5 years, and yet I can say that. And I say that with all sincerity, not delusional, not rose-colored glasses. I feel amazing because I have chosen habits and lifestyle changes that allow me to feel that way. And you can do the same. Yes, people can absolutely change when the motivation is right. And you said that you actually went through kind of a retrospective and went inside yourself to figure things out, which really gave you some strength. And thank you, by the way, for sharing that diagnosis with us. I know that it's tough to talk about that kind of thing, and it's super challenging. I imagine you had just a bunch of emotions, including anger and denial and all the things that go with it. Yeah, I did. I absolutely did. And for a short time, I felt like a fraud because I said, how can I teach people how to create health when I've been diagnosed with this potentially fatal illness? But what I realized is that everything I teach, everything I preach, everything I live, everything I have learned was to prepare me for dealing with this, what is the biggest health battle I've dealt with, during a really horrific year. So what was really magnificent for me was using meditation. And I would strongly encourage you all to use meditation. It is inexpensive, as in zero cost. It is one of the most profoundly powerful and potent tools you will ever use to create health. And it immediately changes you biochemically, immediately. So in meditation, I ask the question, what is this diagnosis for? What am I supposed to do with this? Why did this happen to me? Not poor me, why me, but why did this happen to me in terms of my purpose on this planet? And there were many answers that came to me, but I'm going to share a quick story with you of what the most magnificent learning of this diagnosis. And that was the day after I was diagnosed. It was a bit of a rough day. I'm not going to lie. I had some rage. I had some fear. I had some anger. I had some hard discussions with my children. My son was very emotional and said, please don't just drink green smoothies and hope this will go away, because he knows that I'm not for Western medicine for myself.
Right.
And I encouraged my kids to keep talking to me about their fears, and that I would blend Western medicine with Eastern philosophy, which I did. The next day, I had to show up in a factory where I provide on-site injury prevention services, and I had to work with injured workers. I didn't tell anybody what was going on. I went to work. I, did everything I could to help the people in that factory for 3.5 hours. It's an all-male staff. They're very good to me, and I was able to help a lot of people. And I came into my car after 3.5 hours, and I looked in the mirror and I went, hey, you didn't think about that diagnosis for 3.5 hours. Look at you. And for a moment, I was overwhelmed by how powerful it was to help people. And what that did for me, it gave me a break. For 3.5 hours, I couldn't think of anything but helping these people who were hurting. And that's when I realized that cancer cannot stop me from what I am on this planet to do. I am here to help people with their suffering, to help prevent people's suffering. And nothing is going to stop me. Not a diagnosis, not anger, not fear. Like nothing is going to stop me. And as long as I live, the men in that factory will be as dear to me as virtual family, because they saved my life that day. Because I decided that day that cancer is nothing. I've never even uttered the words, I have cancer. I say I was diagnosed with it because I take no ownership of it. I'm not going to drink the Kool-Aid that I have cancer, because then I'll become a cancer patient. And so I owe them that, because they taught me that valuable lesson. And so what I want to share with you about that is that every single challenge you have ever stood in front of and said, I'll never get through this, I'm not strong enough, I can't. It's all in the past, you guys. You did it. Every single problem you've ever had, you have 100% competence in being able to get through every problem you have ever faced. 100% success. What else in your life have you succeeded at 100% of the time?
So you're essentially changing the inner voice inside yourself, saying, hey,
yep.
I'm powerful, I can do this. And ignoring maybe some of the messages you grew up with that say, hey, no, you can't. So yes, I can. There we go with that little train. I think I can.
Yes.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Oh, you've got some tremendous perspectives here, Sylvia. And definitely we want to cover some more go-to thoughts that can help people change and lower their stress and increase their happiness, and then, of course, their well-being. You've got
absolutely
fantastic insight. This is the Truckers Network radio show. We're talking with Sylvia Marusyk, an international speaker, occupational therapist, and founder of Mind Body Works Canada. Be sure to stay tuned. She's got some great insight coming up right here on TNCRadio.LIVE. This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly, and we're talking with Sylvia Marusyk, international speaker, occupational therapist, and founder of Mind Body Works Canada. Sylvia, you've had some tremendous insight here. What kinds of things can get people out of their stress response? Do you have a toolkit maybe drivers could use?
I sure do. And here's what I want you to think about. These tools are really, really simple. And the ones that I'm going to give you are all designed to do the same thing. I want us to think about fight or flight or dealing with stress as simple as balancing harmful and healthful chemicals in the body. That's as simple as I want you to make it. So basically what we want to do is we want to stop producing so much cortisol. We want to stop letting ourselves get wound up, frustrated, angry, upset as often. So we want to try and dial that down so we're not producing so much of that harmful stuff called cortisol. And then we want to really amp up the volume of these more positive biochemical reactions. We want more serotonin, more oxytocin, more endorphins, and more dopamine. So how do we get those? Well, let's think about some really simple tools that you can use right in your cab. Number one tool, and this is going to sound so lame, but bear with me, is your breath. Now, why do I say that? I want you to think about when you've just had a fright. Okay, you've had a near miss on the highway. The first thing that happens to you is you catch your breath. And then we lose control of the breath. The breath then becomes very rapid and shallow. And try and take a deep breath when you're in the middle of like running for your life or completely terrorized. It's really difficult to control the breath. But here's the cool thing. As soon as you control the breath, you control the entire operating system of this amazing body and the computer that goes with it. So if you want to get your body very quickly out of fight or flight, and we need to because that's a harmful state, we need to get into that parasympathetic nervous system where we can think clearly and problem solve again, where we're producing the hormones of creation, not destruction. Then the first thing you can do is get control of your breath. Now, there's a way to do this that actually accelerates getting into rest and restore. And that is breathing in through your nose, because nose breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system specifically. When you breathe in through your mouth, you actually ramp up your fight or flight response. Because think about it, you pant when you're stressed out. So I want you to, when you are feeling really anxious, frustrated, angry, enraged, whatever, I want you to take 6 slow, deep breaths, and I want you to make them as slow as you possibly can. And this is the ratio of breathing in to out. We're going to breathe in through the nose for half as much time as we breathe out through the mouth. And if you can, slow it down as you get past 4 breaths. So for example, I might breathe in for a count of 2, out for a count of 4. My next breath might be in for a count of 3, out for a count of 6. Can you see that I'm slowing and elongating the breath? The next breath might be in for 4, out for 8, and so on. And what you want to do is get the whole system to slow down. When your body has slowed down, your mind cannot race. It is just impossible. It can't happen. So that's the first thing, is getting control of the breath. The second simple tool that has a profound biochemical effect on the human mind body is gratitude. Every single day, I start my day with a gratitude practice and a brief meditation. My gratitude practice is I try to come up with 20 things that I am grateful for that I experienced or felt since yesterday morning when I last did my exercise. Now you can make it simple, come up with 3. When you are in gratitude, you cannot run a pathway in your brain for anger, revenge, unforgiveness, disappointment, suffering. You can't run those 2 at the same time. So when you live in gratitude, you cannot simultaneously be angry. And in gratitude, we produce more serotonin. So we're getting rid of the cortisol and we're producing serotonin, the good mood fluid. Now, when we talk about endorphins, because endorphins are also a hormone of creation, fastest way to produce them is to get some movement. Now, if you can, get out of your truck and I call these movement snacks. Run around your truck or walk briskly around your truck 2 or 3 times. That's a snack right there. You will jack up the production of endorphins, which lowers the level of cortisol, and you will find that you will be calmer, and you are now in your parasympathetic nervous system.
These are wonderful insights, Sylvia. I wish I could have you continue to talk about all of them. How about we tell listeners where they can reach out to you? Because I'm sure they would love to hear some more insights from Sylvia Marusyk.
Absolutely. You can reach out to me at mindbodyworks.ca. That's my website. You can find me personally at Sylvia at mindbodyworks.ca. And I just want to say that, this is a journey. There is no end point at which you can say, okay, I've arrived. I'm perfect with my stress management. I'm in perfect health. There is no such thing. This is a journey, and there is going to be forward and backward. You're going to have some days that aren't going well and other days that are better. The bottom line is this: recognize that you are not currently living your best life and be willing to do some work to make it better. There are so many options available to you, and small changes can have profound impact on your health. You can create health instead of illness. You just got to give yourself a chance to do that.
Those are words to live by. Thank you so very much, Sylvia, for being on the show. Your insight has been super informative for me as well as the drivers. I really enjoyed this. We definitely would like to have you back.
I love it.
That would be awesome. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. We were just speaking with Sylvia Marusyk, international speaker and owner of Mind Body Works Canada. Definitely stay tuned for more of these interviews and wonderful insights for drivers. We're here for you.
Thanks so much for listening to this podcast. For more information regarding our podcast, reuse, copyrights, etc., please visit our website, www.tncradio.live.